Well, it's been 10 months since I've started this series, and since then I've made a whopping 10 episodes. Nice. Wait, that's not the line, fuck. Honestly, that's better than I was expecting at first, but we've officially hit double digits. I knew I had to pick a unique level for the 10th entry in the famed Legit Level Review series, one that was interesting to both myself and the community as a whole. And what came to my mind? Obviously the shit-infested, gastric acid, gory, and unholy... Well, it actually has quite a lot of holes. Nightmare known as Red Rooms. The images I just showed should give you an idea of what to expect from this level, but just in case I have to spell it out, the contents of this level might be disturbing for some viewers, so watch with caution if you're bothered by fake gore, feces, or whatever the fuck this is. And trust me, I sympathize, Roblox is scary as hell. Anyways, that's enough talking. Let's legitimately review this level.
They think I'm crazy or something. Hop into the bit like a baby or something, I put that cake in the oven, you bitch, you flex like Credo or something, Where did you make all that money? They basically saying they paying for nothing. I'm basically saying they basically bluffing. They bitches gon' act like they faithful or something, I got bands, I got fucking bandits.
Hello everyone, my name is NoobLookingPro, and today I guide you through this horrific gore house of a level to give my personal thoughts on the gameplay of Red Rooms by Devin 2003. Starting off with the first few sections of the level, everything just screams Devin. Devin tends to do a lot of creative things with his structures and gameplay, such as blocky ships that force you to hit all of the orbs so you can progress through the level, and multi-click orbs that require over 3 clicks at a time. In the past, this kind of unconventional gameplay had been done, but in my opinion, this level is one of the better examples of experimenting with gameplay while still maintaining a consistently fun flow. Definitely a strong start to a banger level such as this one. Things definitely start to go downhill at the beginning of the drop, as you are greeted by a wave with the kind of thigh gaps you would see in a challengeless level. It's a very sudden difficulty spike, and not a welcome one either. It ends up in the worst time into the level as well, being halfway into it. This means that you always get there, but can never progress past it. I mean, seriously, this bitch serves as some rough competition to the Golden Shade wave. And if you thought the wave was the only bad thing about this level, then you stand corrected. The ball section that follows seems fine first, but because of the weird alignment of the spikes, it's way too easy to hit the edge of the blocks, killing you in the process. And to me, that's more scuff than a teacher that makes you turn your zoom camera on. In general, this entire ball section has a lot of timings that are way harder than they first seem, which makes it very uncomfortable and unnecessarily butt-clenching to play through. After the metallic section is finished, the good first half of the last part cranks the difficulty down quite a bit for a short while, as to be expected with this type of balancing. It's pretty much the same type of unique concepts, good flow and fair gameplay that could be seen in the first few parts. However, things get a little funkier when we get to the UFO. Just look at it. It looks like a par wannabe made the gameplay. It's not to say it's bad by any means, but it's weird as hell to play. It's pretty spammy and has some weird timings, making it a pretty rough landing towards the ending. Perhaps the most awkward part is when you get to sort of a UFO copter. It kind of feels like you're just hitting a bunch of invisible green orbs. It's not all that bad once you get it down, but certainly a weird way to do things towards the end of a level. The very last section would have been fine overall, but thanks to a transition that makes for a one-way ticket to Demonetization City, it makes the first green orb timing extremely annoying to pull off. This is not the best note to end your level off of, and it makes it even more stressful and annoying. Apart from that, this part isn't too bad to play, though I do wish the transitions weren't as invisible as Krazen after his cancellation. After taking everything into account, my total score for the gameplay is a solid 6 out of 10. The level has very creative and fair gameplay for a good majority, but ultimately drags itself down with poor balancing. Thank you, lovely internet people, for giving me, the troglodyte in default, your loyal attention and time. Back to you, Nugget Man.
The first part of Red Room sets the tone of the level perfectly, with a menagerie of gore that greets you at the start of your journey through Geometry-Hell. What's really interesting to me is just how good this actually looks, especially when it comes to shading and fine details. Taking a look at the muscle patches and bone segments reveal very precise and accurate shading, and the small blood vessels in the eyeballs help this part feel even more authentic, for better or worse. This is also one of the most red parts in the entire level, so if we're taking the name literally, then I'd say Devin nailed it here. While the blocks themselves work great, I don't like the blood splatters used as air deco at all. The coloration of it feels way too similar to the blocks and makes it appear almost like a foreground detail. Now I get it, what other color can blood be besides red? This is an alien blood vape juice after all. It just would have looked a lot nicer if it had been made darker. Even though I've already discussed some spooky stuff in the first few seconds of the level, the scariest shit I've seen has to be the size of these orbs. From what I can tell, they aren't necessary and completely take me out of the atmosphere that this part gives off. This is a problem that stays throughout the entire level, so I won't be ranting about it again, but god, they look so out of place. Let's move down south a bit and visit what I assume is the digestive system. It's pretty obvious in the second half of the part with literal intestine blocks, but the first half almost looks like it's made of dirt with fossils and bugs buried inside of it. I mean, what kind of human digestive system is home to fucking maggots and hand bones? I'm a bit confused on the level lore, but this part looks sick. Literally. It conveys its theme very well, and I feel like the colors are balanced much better here when comparing to the previous part. I never thought I'd say puke green and shit brown work well together, but that's exactly what's happening here. Yet again, Devin uses small details like the maggots and particle effects to convey a very convincing atmosphere, and as a result, this might be my favorite part in the entire level. The second half of the part is much less complex, but it has an extremely cool effect of something traveling through the intestines. It's very subtle and you might not notice it at first, but when I did, I was super impressed. These intestines all look like fun little tube slides you'd find at a water park, and if the end result wouldn't be getting shoved out of this level's asshole, I'd love to ride these things. Where does a digestive system and a geometry dash level lead, you might be wondering? Straight to the shit showdown. The poop pile, the dookie dwelling, the excrement apartment, you name it. There appear to be bits of bone scattered throughout this wasteful wonder, which makes me question what kind of unholy being we just had the displeasure of traveling through. I'm also curious as to what these floating orbs are. If I had to guess, I would say they probably represent flies, but imagining these manure munchkins as poofy gray balls makes the part feel a lot less disgusting to me. This section gets what it needs to across perfectly through hilariously good theming. I never thought I'd be giving credit to a level for encapsulating the feel of fighting the great mighty poo perfectly, but here we are. Unless you're one of those weird fucks with a scat fetish, then I'm sure you're all more than ready to move on from this fecal fuckfest. You'd think the heart of the level would have happened before we went through the wastelands, but apparently there's a magic teleporter that takes us straight from the Dookie dungeon into the cardiovascular system, or as the level tells us, bloodbath. I'm not sure how I feel about the black ground spikes appearing all of a sudden. It disrupts the art flow that the level has had so far, but as you'll soon see, polishing becomes less and less of a worry in the coming parts. That being said, the rest of this part still has some fantastic art. I love the different colored veins and fleshy background in particular, although considering what we saw earlier in the level, the shock value is starting to wear off. The heartbeat animation happening in the background is a really nice touch, and I wish the rest of the level kept up with cool details like that. The transition out of this part is just 2 saw blades and a couple platforms, and it completely takes you out of the level. Quite the heartbreak if you ask me. Factory section is where Red Rooms really starts going downhill for me. This entire part is painfully average when compared to everything before it. It's definitely not bad, but there's a noticeable drop in attention to detail, especially in the background. Up until now, even though the level has had some gruesome and questionable details, it all felt well executed and contributed to the aesthetic. This part feels like it was made just to be edgy. Looking at some of the words in the background, we got torture, rape, gore, snuff, abuse. This honestly just sounds like a 14-year-old 4chan user going through an edgy phase. I was half expecting to see the N-word or some other slur pop up the first time I watched this. On top of that, none of these words match the factory setting. We get a few bloodstains in the second half of the part, but even those are less detailed than anything from earlier. The only other thing this part features are small panels of scratchy bodyline art, ranging from teeth and feet to an actual vagina. Can't show that one on screen or the YouTube gods will send me to the gulag. I'm really surprised Devin didn't squeeze in some room for some good old cock and balls. It would have fit the vibe this part gives off perfectly. Oh well, he makes up for it in Man Man, which no, I will not be reviewing. I'm curious if anyone knows what the letters LTGS stand for. I looked it up and the all-knowing Google told me it stood for Long-Term Goal Study, but that can't be right considering it's in the same part talking about snuff and rape. Also, shout out to this granddaddy thwomp looking motherfucker. It's a completely random inclusion in this already weird and confusing part. This boy dummy thick too. He got them cheeks of the sandy variety if you know what I'm saying. Next up we have what I guess can be called the skin section, since we get to see some very interesting drapes upon entering the part. This bit starts out fantastic. The shading and insane attention to detail remind me of the earlier bits of the level. It's probably also the section I find the most disturbing since the stretched bloody skin effect is done so well. Something I noticed while watching this part was how similar this pillar looked to one of those motherfuckers from Peaceful. Another reason this part is objectively the scariest. Too bad the immersion is ruined by the word cry made out of dash orbs. I get that this isn't supposed to represent your normal geometry dash level, but that doesn't make random atmosphere breaks like this any less annoying. The second half of this bit is a step down from the first, devolving into scratchy line work like seen in the previous part. This would have worked well if more sections of the level looked like this, but as it is, it feels extremely messy, and not in the cool slaughterhouse way. This is also the second time we see the words fuck you Smissagod, and I gotta wonder what this poor soul did to have his curse ingrained into a pile of shit in this gory mess. Are you scared of strawberries, honeycomb, the legendary SpongeBob himself? God help you when it comes to this section then. Thankfully, I'm quite into holes myself, especially when it comes to the ones found on your mom. The holes in this part are a bit more varied, which makes the whole thing much creepier. Like any other part that deals with fleshy blocks, the wrinkles and folds are well made, and the blocks in general really steal the show here. The first half makes you feel like you're traveling through a fleshy sponge maze, and it's another bit that I consider for one of my favorites in the level. Unfortunately, the second half drags it down, since the focus goes almost entirely into the background. While this custom background is one of my favorites in the entire level, since it showcases enough holes to keep an entire all-boys high school satisfied, the second half of this part relies on it way too much. If you like weird and trippy patterns, then I'm sure you love this part, but if you actually have trypophobia, then this is probably almost as scary as seeing Tickle GD art.
Are you serious? This is torture. You're torturing me and everyone else watching. Wait.
Considering what was just shown on screen, the final stretch of this level is surprisingly tame. It features some bones and an RTX-on clubstep monster that you would find in your average Halloween level. Unlike a lot of the previous parts, it's also consistent all the way through, making it the most enjoyable part for me in the entire second half of the level. Devin could make an entire level in this style and the community would eat this shit up, and no, I'm not talking about that. My only complaint here is that the ground feels significantly lazier compared to everything else, but unlike some of the previous parts, it's colored well and fits in with the stuff happening around it. I wanted to make a joke about this bit aging like a dead grandma, but unless your grandma happens to be Satan herself, then I don't think the argument applies. Red Rooms is without a doubt an interesting level. It explores concepts that a lot of Geometry Dash levels are afraid to go through, and in some cases it's impressive, and I commend Devin for it. On the other hand, some sections of the level feel rushed and uninspired, which contrasts badly against the other well-done sections. Despite having graphic content, I also feel like the level did a good job at displaying its art in a decent manner. I didn't cover the snuff section since YouTube no likey, but to briefly give my thoughts on it, I think it's a well-crafted scene. Some might call it cheap since it relies so heavily on shock value, but the rest of the level had enough suggestive content to make this fit the tone. The only section that felt pointlessly edgy was the factory section in the middle, with the words flashing on screen like rape and abuse. It just felt like they were thrown in for no reason, since thankfully no part of the level actually dealt with those topics. Without the factory section, I'd say this works well as an art piece. I'm not against fake violence or gore as long as it's made clear what the subject matter is beforehand, and both the level name and first part act as a disclaimer as well as anything in this game can. But as a Geometry Dash level, it feels disjointed and random, especially in the second half. Because of that, I'm going with a 7 out of 10. If the quality of the first 40% had been kept throughout, then this probably would have been closer to a 9. This brings the final score of Red Rooms to a 6.5 out of 10, which is a fitting score for such an experimental level. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on a controversial level like this, so as usual, drop a like and leave a comment. Earlier I said I wouldn't review Man Man, but if I somehow manage to get either 50,000 views or 2,000 likes on this video, I guess I'll go through the pain of censoring every cock and ball Devin devised into that hellhole. Till next time gamers, peace.